Hi, my name is Spencer Correnti. I run Alkaline Advisors, and today we will be reviewing our favorite tips and tricks in Microsoft Excel. So the reason we put this video together is because we realized that when we started in the industry, there was no good place that we could learn the basics of how to use Microsoft Excel. And we spent a ton of time figuring out all of its functionality on its own. And we sat and we said, hey, what can we develop to teach people how to more efficiently use this program in a very straightforward, easy to digest manner? So with that, we put forth a basic overview on best tips and tricks that we've come across in Excel and how to use them. So with that, we're going to dive into it. You'll see we have all of the tabs below outlined in this table of contents. You can click any of these links and it'll take you directly to the tab, or you can click on the tab directly. And that too will take you to where we are going. So to start, we're going to go to the General Formatting tab. And before we begin with the topics reviewed, we'll talk about freeze panes. So with freeze panes, what we're doing is we are freezing the column or the row or both so that when we scroll, whatever columns or rows we freeze are not moving with our mouse. And to do that, what we do is we go to the View tab up top, and let's do that now. View, and then you can click Freeze Panes. This gives you the option to freeze just the top row. If we do that, you'll see the first row is frozen. We could freeze just the first column. Now the first column is frozen. Or we can put our mouse wherever we want, and it will freeze that column and that row. So if we want to freeze only rows 1 and 2, we would put our mouse on cell A3, go to Freeze Pane, and click Freeze Panes. Now if we scroll down, you'll see that General Formatting line remains there. And if we scroll to the right, no column is frozen. The next thing we'll talk about is grouping cells. So on this blank page right now, you'll notice that we have these black lines that are highlighting some key topics that we're going to review, but there's nothing underneath the topics. Now, in between the black lines, you'll see we go from number 12 to row 37. Where are the other rows? They're grouped. In order to group, what you do is you go to Data and you go to Group or Ungroup. So up here, you click Data and you see Group or Ungroup. And once something is grouped, you can click this plus button, and then whatever is grouped in that plus button will be shown. And you can click it again and it'll compartmentalize, and you click it again and it'll show. So here we can click Ungroup, and now there is no way to group it together. And you can highlight the rows you want to group, click Group, and now it's regrouped. So if we hide it, it'll hide. So next we're going to be talking about cell formatting. Cell formatting is very important because it allows you to get a better sense of how to lay out a more effective and impactful Excel, because ultimately you need to explain whatever work you're doing in Excel to someone else. And we always say that when we are building models, Excel is part art and part science. The science is obviously formulas and the data that you're showing, but the art is how are you representing that data? And you want to build it out in a very clear and concise manner. And for that, you're going to want to format all of your cells. So you'll see when formatting cells, there are a couple ways to do it. The first is going to the Home tab and clicking Cell Styles. So you can click Cell Styles. And then this is going to be where your pre-arranged formats are, or you can create a new cell style. Another way of formatting is by clicking a cell, right-clicking on that cell, and going to the Format Cells button. And by clicking Format Cells, you'll see these 6 options. And we've outlined those 6 options here: number, alignment, font, border, fill, and protection. So we're going to go through them very quickly, just explaining what they do. And then later on in this video, we'll dive a little deeper into all of them. So we'll start with number. When you format a cell with a number, you can actually format the text in the cell to arrange itself in different ways. And we'll explain that in way more detail on the number formatting tab. But these are some of the drop downs and some of the features that you're able to dive deeper into. The next tab is alignment. So with alignment, we can choose how text is aligned within a cell. You can align it to the top of a cell, the center, the bottom. You can align it horizontally across different cells. So for instance, if we write for alignment test, this is one cell. If I put a border around this cell, you'll see it's aligned on the left-hand side. But what we can do is go to format cells. We can do center on the vertical alignment, and we can do center on the horizontal alignment. And now it's in the middle. You can do the same thing up here. Now we can align it left and keep it at the center of the cell, move it to the bottom of the cell. If the cell was larger, you can move it to the top, and you can see it a little better. So that's how you would align cells. One of our favorite tips is aligning text across multiple cells. For example, right now, we'll make this test. It is in one cell. So if you want it to be aligned across 3 cells, you could merge and center, and now you have one big cell instead of 3 cells. And that makes things a little different because merged cells can be a little harder to work with in an Excel sheet. So rather than having a merged cell, what we can do is we can highlight these 3 cells. We can go to format cells, and we can center across selection. And now that text is similarly centered across those 3 cells, but all of these 3 cells are individual cells now, and they're not merged. So if we put in something else over here, now you have these 2 cells that are aligning the text across them versus those 3. And if we delete this, it'll realign itself over these 3 cells. So the next is font, and then border, fill, protection. We'll go through these a little quicker because we'll talk about them in more detail down below under header. So for this next example, what we're going to do is we are going to make a custom cell style, and then we're going to save that cell style and show you how to use that cell style all the time. So if you wanted to style an individual cell, you could open up the Format Cell tab, and you could click Font and change the font. You can change the alignment. You can make it a different color. But then every time you want to update a specific cell to have that same format, you're going to have to do the same thing every time, and that can be cumbersome. So instead, what you can do is you can create custom cells. So we can go to Home, Cell Style, drop down to New Cell Styles, and over here we can create a test cell style with our own custom formatting. So if we want them all to be yellow background, we can have them be able font with red text. Let's say we want a single underline, and we click OK. Now, under test 1, 2, 3, if we were to go back to cell style, you can see that in this cell right here, test 1, 2, 3, and now we can click test, we have that custom info at our fingertips. So now we don't have to recreate a format for a specific cell every time we want to do it. Now, the way that we would apply that is we have created these cell styles for certain types of cells that we have in our Excel workbooks. So we have different styles for headers, subheaders, sub-subheaders, input tab. We have a hybrid input tab, and all of these other formatted cells. So you can input a cell quickly, cell style quickly, by going here, and if we want a input tab, we can say AA input, and now it'll be the same style as we have here. But let's say you already have AA input here. There are a couple ways that we can take this formatting and we can apply it across the board. So the first is we can copy all of this and we can paste. What we could do is paste special, and we could just paste the formatting. And the way you do that is you would click other paste options, formatting, and now you'll see the text didn't translate, but the formatting did. And what we could do is we can scale this all the way over so we have our own individual columns that have the same individual formatting. Another way of doing this is you will see that there is a paintbrush icon here, and you highlight the rows that you want to correspond with the paintbrush icon, and you place it in. You'll notice it translates as well. So what you could do is highlight this and drag it over, and now you have individual columns. So the next thing we'll talk about is paste special. So we just spoke about one function of paste special, but you'll notice that there are a number of different ways that we could paste information. So you'll see typically what we can do is we can paste without the borders, we can paste columns and transpose them into rows, we can just paste formulas, and in this example over here, what we're going to do is we're just going to paste formulas. So you'll see in this formula, we're highlighting and actually summing all of the information in these cells, which right now only captures negative 100. If we made year 4 negative 20, you'll see now we're summing negative 100 plus negative 20. What we'll do here is we will copy this cell and we will paste it in these two cells. And what you could do is you will paste just the formulas, and by doing so, now you'll notice the formatting remains consistent and we're only summing the respective rows that we want to sum in each cell. So similarly, if we just wanted to copy this and paste it as is, that would work for this cell, but if we pasted it as is here, you'll notice the formula is now out of sorts. So this allows you to paste more seamlessly and keep the formatting that you previously had. The next topic that we'll discuss is dynamic cell references. So when you are referencing cells, you can keep them locked or you can keep them unlocked. What does that mean? Well, if I want to make a formula and you start with the equal button, you can set a cell using the equal button to any other cell or a variety of cells. In this scenario, we want to set it to cell G54. And you'll notice in cell G54, right now, all it says is G54. We click enter and you have whatever's in cell G54 here. Well, if we wanted to drag over this formula to the right, holding this bottom corner and dragging it, now you'll notice that we're not just capturing what's in G54, we're actually capturing what's in H54 in this new cell. Sometimes you might want that and sometimes you might not. So in order to better dictate when you want it and when you don't, what we'll do is we will lock in cells. So you'll see here we have unlocked when there's no $sign. We'll have a column locked when you put a $sign in front of the column. We'll have the row locked when we put a $sign in front of the row. And we'll have the full cell locked, so that's both the column and the row will have a $sign in front, and you'll always receive that A here for G54. So for example, starting with unlocked, if we set that equal to G54, we can drag it to the right and you'll see B. We could drag it down and you'll see E, right? Because underneath A is E, to the right of A is B. Now, if we come here and we set, let's say, G55, but lock in column A, so we'll add the $sign. We're capturing E here, and if we drag this down, we're capturing I because we did not lock in the row, we just locked in the column. But if we drag this across, we're still capturing E because we are locked in on column G with this $sign. So similarly, what we could do is we can lock in just the row, and here we would just lock in the number, not the letter. So J translates, but if we drag these down, we don't pick up M and N, right? If we took these, dragged it across without it being locked, everything is picked up. A through M down below and B through N down below. And then finally, we can select a cell and put $signs in front of everything. And now this cell will be locked. Whether we go up or we go down, it'll be locked accordingly. It'll always pull F. So if we're locking static cells, we can go to the formula. You can see right here, we are taking this cell, J60, and we always want to lock cell J60 because we're always going to take 10 units and we want to multiply that by this cell, I-62, which is rent per unit per month, because we're trying to find out the total rent per month. Now, what we can do is we can drag this formula down, and you'll see the formatting will change because here it's per month and here's per year. But if we drag this formula down, we'll have 240,000 because we're still referencing that 10 units because it's locked in. But now, instead of that 2,000, we're referencing this 24,000. And you can see it in more of a concise snapshot in this dynamic cell locking matrix. What we're doing here is we're saying we have an NOI of $100,000 on an annual basis, and we have a cap rate of 5.5. What we want to say is, what is the value of this asset? Not just at $100,000 a year at a 5.5 cap, but what if it's at a $200,000 NOI at a 7 cap? Well, rather than write out the formula every time where we take this cell and divide it by this cell, right? Because we could just do this cell divided by this cell and we get the same number. What we want to do is we want to create a formula that allows us to drag down and drag to the right and capture the right information. And if we do that now without locking any of the cells, you can see we're not capturing the right information. What we can do is we can lock in the row, which means that every time we drag this down, the reference to row 67 will always remain row 67. But every time we drag this across, the reference to column C will always remain column C. So when we're referencing this cap rate over here, right, because we want to know at a 150 NOI and a 5.5 cap, what will the value be? We're still taking that 5.5 cap because column C is locked, but we're now able to capture 150,000 NOI instead of 100,000 because column D is not locked, but row 67 is locked, which is up here. So the next topic in terms of general formatting that we want to talk about is comments versus notes. If you're actively in Excel with different people, or you are using many different iterations of one Excel sheet because you're constantly updating it and you want to leave yourself reminders, you can create different comments and you can create different notes. So we want to talk about the difference between each. So to start, the way that you would capture a comment or a note is you would go to review, and you'll see up at the top, you'll see we have notes over here and we have comments over here. What we've done is we've outlined some features, and we're going to talk about how these features relate to both comments and notes. So with comments, comments are collaborative where notes are not collaborative. This is what a comment looks like. If we were to write show comments, they pop up on the side, or if you hover, you'll see the comment. If you leave a comment, it'll show purple. If you hover your mouse over this, let's exit out of this, and you hover your mouse over this, it'll pop up right here. Comments are collaborative, so you can leave an initial comment. It'll track when that comment was made, and then if you want to reply to that comment, or you see someone else's comment and you want to reply to it, you can do so, and now it'll capture your comment too and show what time that comment was made. So you can track a conversation and you can delete replies as you address them. So for instance, if I want to delete that hello comment because someone else left it for me and I already saw it, I can delete the comment and now it's no longer here. So it's very helpful if you want to leave someone else feedback, or you want additional clarification in a model that you're looking at. And if you want to look at all the comments quickly, you can just click show comment and they'll all pop up on the side, so you don't have to hover your mouse over each of these purple buttons. Now, when we talk about notes, notes are a little different. There are a couple ways you can look at notes. So first, the notes will be red, and you can hover your mouse over a note and you'll see it pops up kind of like a yellow sticky note. And here you can see that you can keep them so they pop up, or you can hide them with this notes drop down. So you can say show hide notes. So if you show the note will always be shown and you don't have to hover. If you hide the note, let's see, we go over here and we click hide note, then it goes away until you hover again. And then you can also convert that note to a comment, or you can edit the note, or finally you can delete the note. So you can leave notes when you want to remind yourself on why you might have structured something the way you did, or you want to instruct someone how to use a certain feature in the Excel. And that's why notes can be good. So the next tab we're going to jump to is number formatting. On the number formatting tab, we're going to talk about why we format some cell styles with some number formats versus others. And to start, what we're going to do is we're going to explain how and what the number formatting means. And this will save you a lot of time when it comes to actually getting the numbers formatted the way that you want. So before we even get there, I want to show you some different number formats. If I type in 1000 here, you'll see we have 1000, 1000, there's no comma. If we type in negative 1000, it's just negative 1000. There's no different colors or parentheses. We can create formatting that will be conditional upon whatever the number looks like. So to do that quickly, you can click this drop down and there are a few preloaded options here. So if we want to show accounting, we can do so here. This will right align everything and it'll add a $sign here. It'll have 2 decimal spaces and it'll have a comma so that you can see it's $1,000. You can get rid of those decimal spaces by clicking this button. You can add decimal spaces. You can change the formatting to currency. So now you'll see it looks different because the $sign is closer and it's now not right aligned as it was before the number. There's not that extra space. We can make this general, and again, you'll lose the comma. So there are a number of different ways to actually format cells. For instance, if we make this negative and you make this 1000, you'll see now there are parentheses around this number. So this is just the beginning of how to actually format certain numbers. And the way you can custom format these numbers is, again, to right click, go to Format Cells. For the pop-up underneath number, you can go to custom and you can customize the format as you want, or you can go to some more predetermined number formats, right? If you want negative numbers to be red, you can do so here. If you don't want $signs, you can say none. But when we customize, we have very specific ways that Excel analyzes these custom numbers. And that's as follows. We can build out custom formats for positive values, negative values, zeros, or text. So for example, if you want a positive number to show up as green and a negative number to show up as red and a 0 to show up as XXX and any text to just read the text as it is, you can create formatting for that separated by semicolons. And then down below, we have some of the custom format symbols that we'll use more frequently to customize some of the numbers and some of the text. So when doing this, you can see if you type out 0, it'll be a digital placeholder that will have leading or trailing zeros. So right now, if you're just in general, you type in 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, you'll see you lose those zeros. But if you go to custom formatting, so again, format, and for custom, we type in, let's say 0, 0, 0, and now we do 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. You'll see that 0, 0 remains. Right, so it's just different ways to capture different numbers. Similarly, we can add pound signs, and those pound signs are digital placeholders without extra zeros. We can signify when we want decimals and to what placeholder. We can signify when we want to add commas. We can multiply by hundreds to show percentages. One of our favorite tricks is adding text to a cell. So right now, if I wanted to write 5 units, right, I can add 5 units. And now if I wanted to multiply these 5 units by any figure, so if I say by 2, we get an error because 5 units is not a number. 5 is a number, but units is text. So what we could also do is we can make this, that's the old formatting, we can make this a 5, and then add formatting. So if we go to Format Cells, Custom, we can add a number and then add units after, and it'll show up like this, right? 5 units here. So now if we click OK, you'll see 5 units is shown here, but we still only have that number 5 allocated here. So if we wanted to multiply now this 5 units by 2, we have the ability to do so. So that's pretty useful when creating formulas and using text in those formulas for a more seamless calculation. And you can see some other custom formats we have here. If we want a day or a month or a year, and different ways we can signify day or month or year, right? You can say month for July as 7 or 07 or just JUL or the full July, based on whether you want to start with 1M, 2Ms, 3Ms, or 4Ms. So after this custom formatting symbol, we will go to the sample formats. So the sample formatting is in line with what I just outlined, and you will see if we take the same formatting approach as we did before, we can type in any number here and it'll show months, right? We typed in 10 and it'll show 10 months. So if we go to Format Cell, it's because we have months highlighted here. Similarly, in this next cell, what we've done is we said we wanted different formatting for positive numbers versus negative numbers versus 0 versus text. So this is the formula that, or these are the figures that we have in the formatted cell area. So again, if we go to Format Cell, you'll see this is what's here. So if we type in a positive number like 50,000, you'll see it's highlighted here. If we type in a negative number, it'll show up red and have parentheses. If it's 0, it'll be a hyphen. And finally, if we have text here, it'll show up as NA. We have a similar format structure down below, is saying that anything above $1 million, instead of showing it with 7 digits, we want to capture it with 2 digits, or at least 2 digits, 2 or more, where it will have an M at the end to signify that it's a million. If it is above 1,000 but less than a million, and let's do 2,000, it'll capture it with a K to signify 2,000. And if it's anything else, we want to do the dash. So for instance, if it's 0, it's going to be a dash. And I think if it's a negative number, it's going to be 2 dashes. So that is another way to capture text. And then finally, we've got the date. So if we want July 24th, 2025, we can do 7/4/25. But you'll see it'll say July because we have 4 M's. It'll say 4, not 04, because we have 1D instead of 2. And then it'll say 2025 instead of just 25 because we have 4 Y's. And that is really the biggest takeaways on the number formatting. So the next section we'll talk about is conditional formatting. With the conditional formatting, what we'll do is we will change formatting of a cell if something is prompting us to do so. And I'll explain what that means. To do what we're setting out to do, we will go to Home, Conditional Formatting. So this is the Home tab. We go to Conditional Formatting. And then we can create different rules depending on the outcomes of different cells. So essentially, we are going to use decision indicators. So when cells are showing certain things, they're going to be formatted differently than if they're shown other things. And what that means is that we can change color, we can change text, but it's all going to be driven based off of what is inside the cell to begin with. So here, you'll see, does the project profit meet the target profit? Green means yes, and red is no. So what we want to show is the target profit is 3.7 million. Anything above 3.7 million, we want this to show green, and anything below 3.7 million, we want this to show red. And what you can do is you can add in different conditional formatting rules. So here, if we go to manage rule, we can see what rule is here. If we go to highlight cells or rules, we can add rules. Because this is colored and because we already built this out, we know that there's already rule here. So if we click manage rules, you'll see it's saying that if H23, so this is H23, this $5 million is less than H26, which is the target profit, then highlight this cell red, right? It applies to H27. We're saying if H23 is more than the target profit, we want to highlight this cell green. So to showcase, let's make this 5,000,001. Well, because, that's 50,000,001, which still gets the point across, but let's make this 5,000,001. Because our target profit is $1 more than our actual profit, now this cell is highlighted red. So this enables us to more quickly and accurately get a picture of what's going on in an Excel, not just based on the numbers, but based on formatting as well. So down below, you can see some examples of how this could be a little more useful as well. So here we've already set up conditional formatting. We've highlighted all of this. You can see we have manage rules, and we've outlined the rules before. What we're doing is we are highlighting rows. So before it said apply to one cell, now we're applying it to full rows when G38, for instance, so G38, which is going to be these numbers in the rows, the rent per month, when that is greater than this figure right here, H33, then we want to highlight that whole row yellow. So right now, if we make this 0, everything highlights. If we make this 50,000, what's less than 50,000 is not highlighted. And if we make this 200,000, we only have one row above 200,000. And you can see there are different ways that we can conditionally format. So here we're conditionally formatting the rows, but we can apply the same thing for columns, right? If we want to just look at the unit count, but if we want to look at the unit mix, we can select unit mix, and we'll talk about data validation, how to create these drop downs on the next tab. But if we select unit mix, you'll see now this red outline is only covering unit mix. Similarly, we can have it cover rent per year. We can have it color rent per unit per month. It just allows you to see how you can use conditional formatting to visually appeal to whomever you're presenting to. So the next tab we'll get into is data validation. So for data validation, this allows us to put guide rails around different inputs. What does that mean? That means that we can better guide whoever's using this model. So here first you can say, we can add a note. So the note says enter a number between 0 and 100%. So what if we put in 101%, or we accidentally put in 1,000%? You'll see it says invalid entry. GP contribution must be between 0% and 100%. Now, it has an Excel alert, and this looks pretty official. We are able to create this alert. So if we click cancel, we go back here and we say 10%, you'll see everything updates automatically. Let's open this dynamic formula as well, and we'll get into this in a second. But the reason why we're able to do this is because we're going to data validation, right? So this is H16, cell H16. We are going to data up here. We are going to this data validation dropdown, and we're clicking data validation. And you can see under settings, we are saying allow decimal for data between 0 and 1, or 0 and 100%, because it's a decimal. And we want to have that note pop up, show input message when cell is selected, that note. If we hide this, it won't show up anymore. So after this, we'll press OK, and I'll show you it won't show up. And then finally, we have this error alert. So we can say invalid entry, or we can say halt, please try again. or whatever you want it to say, and you can add an error message. So sometimes you can add a warning and sometimes you can add an information, but for us, we're gonna say stop so that you can't go any further with the calculation. So if I click OK, now if you click this, there is no note, but if we click 1000%, you'll see it says halt, please try again. Right, if I click retry, it's not gonna work. So we're gonna have to update, and 100% is fine, so that works here. So that's one way you could use data validation. So next we're gonna dive into this dynamic formulas and formatting. And in this example, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create the drop-down list. So whereas before, what we were doing is saying you can only put a number between 0 and 100% into that cell. Here, we're saying that you can only choose between one of two drop-downs. If we want to plug in a number, it'll say you're unable to do so. So what we'll do is we can go up to data, we go to data validation, and you'll notice under allow, we're not clicking decimal like we did last time, we're clicking list. And when we have list, we can build this out a couple of ways. First, if there's text that we want to work with, we can highlight that text and drag it and then click OK. And whatever we're highlighting will be the drop down. Or what you could also do is click data validation and you can type in the text you want shown, separate it by a comma, click OK, and it'll also allow you to do so here. And we've also built out conditional formatting so that when percentage is shown, dollar amount disappears, and when dollar amount is shown, percentage disappears. So if we go back to percentage, you'll notice we also put in that data validation here, so we can't put in 1000%, right? Because it'll show us the same invalid entry sign. And because we want $3 million of equity, and we're saying the GP, let's say, is going to bring 50%, the LP will bring in 50%, they're going to be splitting that 3 million, 1.5 and 1.5 million. So the next tab we will review is the named range section. The named range section is great when helping us more seamlessly write out Excel formulas, when helping us audit Excel formulas, because you are going to be jumping when you're writing formulas back and forth between different tabs, maybe even between different Excel workbooks altogether. And when you are naming a range, it allows you to take the cells that could just say a number and a letter or a matrix of a number and a letter, and we can apply a specific title to those cells. So this is how you create a name range. There are different options. Option 1, you select a cell or range. So let's select this cell. A cell is a cell and a range is a list of cells together. So if we select a specific cell, we can change the name that appears in this name box on the left, top left up here. And it says D38, but what we can do is we can say test underscore. And now this new cell is referred to as test underscore, whereas this cell is referred to as D27, right? This is now test underscore, and this is D29. So if test underscore had a 5 in it, what we can do is, if we're setting a cell equal to D27, right, it'll show up as, and we'll say D27 is 4, it'll show up as 4. We could also say test underscore, and it'll show up as 5. So this is helpful if we want to quickly identify a figure and we're not really sure what cell it's in, or we don't want to memorize what cell it's in. And the example down below for practice is us saying we have a start date. So with this cell, we're saying that rather than calling it H25, we're going to name it start date. So now every time we want to figure out how many days after the start date, either construction's completed or stabilization is occurred or refinance occurs or we're selling the asset, how many months after the start date, what we'll be able to do is we'll say, without naming the range, it's going to be this cell and this month, right? And you'll see same thing, it's going to be the cell and the month. But here we're saying we have that shortcut where it's start date and the month over here. So we have start date in all of these versus the cell, letter, and number. So if we're on another tab, for instance, too, we can say start date. And you'll see now it's just in a number because we want to change it to a date. And now it's at August 1st, 2025 figure. And if we were to go back to the name ranges, you'll see August 1st, 2025. So that's a way we can use the named range section. Underneath, we'll have formula auditing. So similarly, we said that sometimes it's helpful when we are auditing formulas because you can see naming conventions if we want a range of the sum for C42, right? C42 to C50, that's going to be this. The full range would be this figure, but we can say unit count instead, and this will sum up the total units. We can create a sum and lock that in, or we can just say sum unit count, and it'll be that 265 unit figure down below. So we can name different units and different cells, different things for us to more seamlessly able to reference them. The next tab we'll review is the goal seek tab and goal seek functionality. So we use goal seek when we want to solve for a certain figure and we don't want to have any circular references. So what does goal seek allow us to do and how to use it? So we want to determine in this example, we want to determine what this figure would have to be in order for us to receive in this example, 25% IRR. Now we're calculating the IRR over here, and we're saying that we want to set a target IRR to this figure of 25%, but we don't know what this number has to be, the sales proceeds, and we also want to calculate what this figure needs to be in order to give us a 25% IRR. So they're kind of it's an iterative calculation because both of those are variables. In order to figure out what the sales value is, right? If this is $1 million, we'll make this $1 million. You'll see this is tied here. Then we have a 61% IRR. If it's $1,000, it's a 6%. $100,000, it's a 6% IRR. But what we want to do is say, what is this number and how do we get a 25% IRR with this number being whatever number gives us a 25% IRR? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Data, What If Analysis, and Goal Seek. So we're going to go to Data, What If Analysis, Goal Seek. We're going to set this cell, so it says set cell here, to H22. To value, it's going to be 25%. We're going to manually type in 25%. By changing this cell down here. So essentially it's saying we want to set our project IRR to 25% using a target IRR of 25%. And we want to change this variable. So we've set this variable 100,000. So the sales proceeds to whatever's here. So just by changing essentially this number, but we're changing it down here just so everything's in one area. So if we click OK, you'll see we're iterating. And now what it's showing us is we need to sell the asset $255,860 in year 5. And by doing that, that'll help us achieve a 25% IRR. And that is how we do a goal seek. The next tab we will walk through are errors and external links. So when you're working in Excel, you will come across your fair share of errors. Different errors are shown in different ways. And what we've done is we've outlined all of the different errors that you might come across, what they mean, how you can avoid them, and then when you might see them with formulas and calculations. So in this cell, we have the formula with the error, and you'll see it's like we have equal with the formula. We've actually removed the equal sign, so if you don't have the video, you can see what the formula looks like without the equal sign. what we would do to fix the error without the equal sign, and then what the fix looks like when you add it back, when you add the equal sign back. So the formula is as it might be. And I won't dive through all of these, but we have divide by zero or value or name. You might see these pound signs. This is actually not an error. What you need to do with the pound sign is you just need to make the cell larger, and then the accurate information will show. So what we are going to do here is we're going to walk through one example, and that's going to be the div 0 value. Because what you might do is when you are calculating information here, we want to calculate debt service coverage ratio. So we are taking the net operating income and we are dividing it by the debt service. And because we have NOI in year 2 and because we have debt service in year 2, we're able to calculate a number. But because in year 1 we don't have any debt service, we're dividing by a 0, and when you divide by a 0, you can't do that in mathematics. So instead of just saying we're dividing by a 0, Excel can't handle that, so it'll show you an error sign. So what we can do instead is we can add an if error formula. And essentially what that allows us to do is it says if there is an error with whatever the value is, so this was the value that we want to calculate, if this value is unable to calculate as it needs to, Excel is going to show us this figure right here. So if we make this 100, for instance, now it'll say 100. But we want to make it 0 instead because it's clean and it doesn't say div 0. Now, these are the same figures, but if you're presenting this to someone and they say div 0, it looks like an error, and they might not take your Excel as seriously as if it was more clean and presentable. So for instance, again, we can do if error, and then we can make this 0, and similarly, everything will calculate. And you'll see this now has an if error sign, but it's still calculating as it was before because there was no error here. So next we'll go to external links. So sometimes when you're linking cells to different formulas, or you have just links in general, you'll notice that you can link to a certain cell. If I'm linking to a cell on this tab, see it says just F25, for instance, if I'm linking here. If I'm linking to a cell on another tab, you'll see it's referencing the tab in which we're linking the cell to. And then if we go to F25, it'll say goal seek tab F25 versus just F25 here. Why? Because they're both F25s and it needs to reference the right tab. Now, you can also reference a different workbook. You might get an Excel that is referencing another workbook, and there might be a pop-up that says external links referenced when you open up the Excel document. So there are a couple of ways to identify where the links are located, and then also how to disassociate an Excel with any previously linked Excels. So we've outlined those ways to find external links here. You can go to data or workbook. So here is data, and then you can see workbooks. We don't have any workbook links attached to this model, but if you did, this workbook link button will not be grayed out. You'll be able to click it and it'll show you that there are different links, and you can click that you want to disassociate or unlink from those other workbook links. You can search. So if you Command F or Control F, you can use the find pop-up, and you can choose whether you want to advanced search, and you can choose find what. You can look for .xl or a open bracket or a closed bracket to find the actual links and where they are, and then you can acknowledge at least what's linked where and why. So those are some options. You can also do named ranges, and you can look at data validations. So the next section we'll be reviewing is charts and graphs. When you're presenting information to folks in Excel, you're going to want to make sure that the data is really easy to understand, and what better way of doing so than to put forth some visuals. Now, there are a number of ways that you can build out charts and graphs, but a very straightforward and easy way of doing so is by highlighting the information that you want captured, going up to Insert and clicking Recommended Charts, and clicking whatever chart you want, and there you go. Simple as that. Very straightforward to create charts and graphs. And depending on what data you're highlighting and what data you're showcasing, you can put in different charts and different graphs. You can have them be different colors. If you click on the chart or the graph, right click on it and select Change Chart Type, or you come back up to Insert. If you click on the chart, you can go to Chart Design. You can have more opportunity to play around with the type of chart. You can change the chart type. You can select different data. You can change colors. You can really customize a chart however you'd like. And this is a very straightforward to use charts and graphs in Excel. And then the last tab we'll review is print setup. So you might have a lot of work in Excel and you might want to put that into PDF and print it out and share it at a meeting. So a lot of times it can be daunting to convert an Excel to a PDF, but it's really straightforward. And we'll show you a couple ways to do so. So before that, what we want to do is we want to explain to you how you can create a footer, because when you're printing information out, you might print out 5 different versions of Excel on different dates, and you might want to show people, depending on the different date or what company put the Excel or what page of the printout you're showing, you want to illustrate them and identify them differently. So for that, you're going to want to add footers to your PDFs or your printouts. And to do so, you're going to go to Page Layout up top. You're going to go to Page Setup, which is this button. And this is going to show you what you can do. You can print as landscape or portrait. You can go and adjust the margins. You can add headers and footers. In this section, we're going to add footers, and by clicking the footer drop down, you can add different types of footers, or you can add a custom footer. You can build out your own custom footers. And then we have sheets right here. You see it says custom header, custom footer. That's where you build it out. Here we have sheets. We can choose if we want to print different areas, which we'll get into in a second. You'll notice here we just have page 1, page 2, page 3 highlighted, and those are the green dashed lines that are moving here, and you'll notice we don't have green lines anywhere else. We can choose if we want the Excel to print down and then over, or over and then down. There are different ways you can customize the print section. So we've talked about the footer, and to talk about printing, as I said, there are a number of ways to do it, but the easiest way that I think to do it is if you go to View, you can go to Page Break Preview, and you'll see the Excel look like this, where everything's grayed out except for what's going to be printed. You'll see we've labeled it over here, page 1, page 2, page 3, but Excel will show you what the pages look like. Now, let's say we had data here that we wanted to capture. Right now it's grayed out, but if we move this over, you'll see the print page moves over as well. Now this is white, right? Why is that white? Because we had this colored blue on our own accord, and you'll see this blue has a dotted line here because it says page 1, page 2 now, page 3, and page 4. But if we want this here overview to be on page 1, we can drag that dotted line over, and now all of this is page 1. This is page 2, this is page 3, and when printing it out, this is what it would look like. Still page 1, page 2, page 3. We now have that here cell identified there. And if we wanted to capture everything without the dots, you can do so here, and now all of this will be on page 1. That's one way of doing it. And the other way of doing it, as we mentioned before, was going to Page Layout, Orientation, Page Setup, right? So there are different ways. You could go to Page Layout, you can go to Page Setup, you can go to Orientation for the portrait and landscape, you can go to Page Setup to do exactly as we said before. What are we printing? Here, we're printing these different regions. We're highlighting what we want to print, and then we're clicking comma and highlighting again the separate area we wanted to print. Click comma and finally highlight the third area and click OK. And that is how you set up the different print areas. So finally, we've built out a practice tab for you to use. The practice tab just outlines everything we've already reviewed, but gives you a chance to go through it on your own and use what you learned in this Excel and apply it so that hopefully it comes a little faster and becomes a little stickier to you so you can use it when it really matters and you are in the trenches building these Excels. So feel free to roll through this practice tab. But other than that, that is it. We really hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. This is a majority of the tips and tricks that have saved us hundreds and hundreds of hours, are very easy to know once you know them. But obviously you don't know what you don't know. And hopefully now you know what you didn't know and you can learn from there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If you don't mind leaving us some feedback on what you think of this video and anything else you might want to learn, please click this button. It'll take you to a feedback form. We're happy to post more videos. And if you want additional insight into some other things we're working on, we have a glossary of useful commercial real estate terms down below. We have a video and an Excel document to Commercial Real Estate Underwriting 101. This again is Excel tips and tricks. And we also have a sample model test that we've hyperlinked to this Excel as well. But really appreciate you joining us, and congrats to you for wanting to learn more about Excel. It's going to make your life much easier. It's a very, very helpful tool. And with that, we thank you for joining and wish you all the best as you continue on your journey learning more about Excel, commercial real estate, and how to be as efficient as possible in all that you do. So thanks again. We'll talk to you later.